I'm Stephen Monteith, and I'm here to recommend a viewing order for the Star Wars movies. I call it the spoiler order. I've been watching a lot of videos lately of people who are watching Star Wars for the first time. Most of them are little kids where their parents just want to get the reaction shot of the kids seeing the iconic twist moments for the first time. But some of them are adults, usually in their 20s or so, who have never seen so much as a single Star Wars movie. They always seem to go in order of release date because someone, usually commenters, told them that that's the order they need to do it to preserve the spoilers that I mentioned. Watching the movies in chronological order would obviously spoil some of those twists. And if you've seen the Star Wars movies, then you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the Star Wars movies yet, then I should warn you right now that I am going to discuss those spoilers. If you're watching this and you don't want anything from any of the movies spoiled for you, then I'll just say that the spoiler order preserves them. It preserves those twists, and you can see the list in the description. But I'll just say that the spoiler order is you watch Episode 1 first, The Phantom Menace, then you watch Episode 4, A New Hope, then you watch Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Then you watch Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Then you watch Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And then you watch Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Like I say, it's in the description. It's the order I recommend. And if you don't want anything spoiled for you, you can stop the video right here. If you're still listening, then either you know the spoilers or you don't care about the spoilers. So, or maybe you've already guessed what the spoilers are, like those people that I mentioned in the React videos, because these are spoilers that just about everybody already knows. They're basically that Yoda is the little green guy with big ears in the swamp that Luke meets in Empire Strikes Back, and that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. It's not even really fair to call these spoilers at this point. They're like knowing that Rosebud is the sled, or that Rhett Butler frankly doesn't give a damn. Those kind of things were shocks that shocked the audience when the movies were initially released, but that are now pretty much common knowledge, even for people who've never seen the movies. You basically have to be one of those little kids I mentioned earlier to not already know these things. Preserving spoilers simply isn't a realistic goal anymore. Not with the saturation of memes and merchandise and all kinds of media. And that's why I don't endorse things like the so-called Machete Order, whose main goal is to preserve those spoilers. The Machete Order for Star Wars is to watch Episode 4, then Episode 5, then 2 and 3, and then Episode 6. It's not just about preserving spoilers, though. According to the reasoning given in the original article by Rod Hilton, aka Machete, he thinks of the Star Wars franchise as Luke Skywalker's story. He wrote the article before the sequels and the standalone movies came out, by the way. He says that the prequel trilogy tells no story of its own and serves primarily as background for the original trilogy. He also says that basically the first movie, Phantom Menace, doesn't have anything to do with Luke Skywalker at all, which is why he left it out of the viewing order. I disagree. Star Wars isn't just the story of Luke Skywalker. The other characters don't just exist to support his arc. Obi-Wan and Darth Vader are fully independent characters in their own stories. I'd even argue that in the original trilogy, they're at least as important as Luke himself. Certainly Vader is. And while in Episode 1, Qui-Gon Jinn is a more prominent character than either Obi-Wan or Vader, it's his influence on both of them that informs their relationship and their characters going forward. So Episode 1 can't be so easily discounted. Not to mention, as I said in my Star Wars video where I rank all the movies, Anakin's pod racing is a clue to the kind of person he'll eventually become. Because when he's pod racing, he's not only able to use the Force, but he's able to stay calm while people are dying violently all around him. I mean, that's the kind of thing you'd expect a Sith to be able to do. And there are a couple other characters introduced in Episode 1 who will be important throughout the saga. First, there's Senator, then Chancellor, then Emperor Palpatine. You cannot deny that, as confusing as the politics in Episode 1 gets, it's the movie where we first see this chess master at work. And on the other side, there's Yoda, wise Jedi Master and member of the Jedi Council. Again, there's a little point in trying to preserve the twist of the little green alien on Dagobah turning out to be the great warrior that Luke seeks. Even if it weren't for all the Baby Yoda memes and the toys everywhere, Yoda himself is on bottles of soda, holding his lightsaber. There's no more shock to preserve when it comes to his character, so I'm not even going to try. So what's the point of having a unique viewing order anyway, you might ask? Why not just watch the movies in chronological order? Well, I'll talk about the virtues of chronological order at the end of this video, but for right now, let's just say there may be someone out there who doesn't know that Anakin and Darth Vader are the same person. Or maybe you think the prequels are hokey and the only way to get through them is by blending them with the original trilogy somehow. But for me, as a writer, from a storytelling perspective, the spoiler order is simply the best way to watch the first 6 movies. The idea of an anachronic order, an out-of-order order, basically, has been used in movies and TV shows for decades. A movie will show you a scene in the present moment, and then it'll show you a flashback, or maybe even a flash forward, depending on how the filmmakers think the story is best told. A TV show will introduce characters at the beginning. They'll have a certain way about them, they'll have certain characteristics, and then maybe a few episodes, or even a few seasons in, you'll get the origin story that tells us why they are the way they are, or how the characters met each other for the first time. It's not always the best way to tell a story, but it's an example of how you don't always have to tell the story in a straight line. You don't always have to start at the beginning and then go straight to the end. So here's how the story would play out in the order I suggest, the spoiler order. You start with Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. It gives you a setting, a long time ago, a galaxy far, far away. It introduces some principal characters, namely Obi-Wan and Anakin. Some background characters will be important throughout, like Yoda and Palpatine. And it gives you a decoy protagonist in Qui-Gon Jinn, much like how Ned Stark was the decoy protagonist in Game of Thrones. You get some good action scenes, you get some humor, you get the hook at the end where Anakin becomes Obi-Wan's apprentice. Then you watch Episode 4, A New Hope. Now it's Luke Skywalker on Tatooine, living with his aunt and uncle. He meets R2 and 3PO, the droids from the first movie, and then we meet up with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Watching this movie after Episode 1, but before Episodes 2 and 3, sets up more suspense. How did Obi-Wan come to be living on Tatooine? You know, what happened to the Jedi? What happened to Luke's father, Anakin? Luke and old Ben talk about these things, and Obi-Wan gives some vague answers, some of which are only true from a certain point of view. We learn that Darth Vader, the man we just saw capture Leia, also hunted down the Jedi and destroyed them. Basically, he's who comes in after Darth Maul, who, as cool as he was only able to take out one Jedi before Obi-Wan sliced him in half. And as Obi-Wan tells us, Vader murdered Anakin. If you watch Episode 4 first, then hearing that really doesn't mean anything to you. It means something to Luke, because he spent most of his life wishing he'd gotten to meet his father, and now he hears that his father was betrayed and murdered. But it doesn't really mean anything to us, because we never met Anakin. But if you watch Episode 1 first, and then Episode 4, then you've met Anakin. You don't know what his fate is yet, you don't know what he'll grow up to be. You just know that he's Obi-Wan's new apprentice, and that he was a slave on Tatooine. And then you learn that he was murdered. Now it has some added emotional weight to it for the viewer. And even more weight is added when Vader kills Obi-Wan later in the movie. We hear that he left Obi-Wan as merely the learner, but now that he's the master, a master of evil, but a master nonetheless. We know he's going to show up somewhere in either Episode 2 or 3, but we still have more to watch. Now we go back to Episode 2. We've watched Episodes 1 and 4. Now it's time to watch Episode 2. There's been a significant time skip between 1 and 2, just like there is between all the original 6 Star Wars movies. But an added benefit of watching 4 between 1 and 2 is it gives us the sense of time passing. If you just go straight from 1 to 2, then there is a bit of whiplash when you see Anakin go from being a short little kid to being a tall young adult. It's cushioned more this way. Anyway, we watch Episode 2 and we see that Darth Sidious does have a new apprentice, but it's Christopher Lee. Okay, so we have to wait a little longer to see Darth Vader, but we know he'll show up at some point. We also see Jango and Boba Fett, which will be a nice payoff when we watch Episode 5 next, and see that Boba is flying his father's ship and wearing somewhat similar armor. You know, we don't have to wait too long for that little relationship to pay off. We also learn that in Episode 5, which is, you know, we've watched Episode 2, now we're moving on to Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, the most important one, the one that everybody makes the focus of their viewing order because of the twists in it. We learn in Episode 5 that Yoda survived Vader and the Emperor hunting down all the other Jedi. Now, right at the beginning of the movie, Obi-Wan's Force Ghost tells Luke to seek out Yoda. The questions start to arise. What's he doing on Dagobah? You know, how did he survive? What exactly happened during the Jedi Purge? What happened in Episode 3? The tension and suspense build up a lot more than for these kind of questions than if you start with 4 and then watch 5 and then go back to watch the prequels at some point. And then comes the wham line, the wham moment, as they say. Vader and Luke fight. Vader cuts off Luke's hand, like we saw Dooku cut off Anakin's hand in Episode 2, giving us more parallels between Luke and Anakin. And then Vader asks Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father, did he? Here it comes. Now, instead of just 2 movies building up to it, we've had 4 movies building our investment in these characters, in the question of what happened to everyone, especially Anakin. It adds so much more weight to the line, I am your father. See, now it's not just the shock of finding out that Vader is Luke's father. It's the shock of finding out that he's the person we were watching in episodes 1 and 2. He wasn't just some dark side equivalent of Anakin. He's actually Anakin. And if your intent in picking a viewing order is to preserve the shock value of that line, then you may as well pack as much punch into it as you can. And then after you watch episode 5, you go back to episode 3. Now nothing in there is a spoiler. Now nothing that happens with Anakin becoming Vader is any less of a spoiler for you. But the thing about watching the original trilogy and then watching the prequels, or even in watching the Machete Order, is you don't go straight to that from episode 5. You know, you don't go straight into seeing the final transformation, getting all of that, getting the final pieces of the puzzle about how Anakin becomes Vader, or about how Palpatine becomes Emperor, or about how the Jedi become disbanded, and how Obi-Wan and Yoda become exiles. Both of these stories now have time to build up on their own, alongside each other, and you get to take all of it in a much more measured way. Of course, there is still one twist left, and that's that Luke has a twin sister. We get that bit of info in both episode 3 and episode 6, so at this point there's, again, no point in trying to decide how much longer to preserve it. All that's left is to finish setting up the final conflict in Return of the Jedi, where all of the storylines have been building up alongside each other. Like I said, everything about Anakin and Obi-Wan and their relationship with each other comes to a head, and Luke's relationship with Obi-Wan as well. You get to see the parallels between Obi-Wan training both of them. You get to see the parallels with both of them flirting with the dark side, and how Anakin fell into it, but Luke is still struggling. We don't know what's going to happen to him just yet. And we see how the Emperor has been manipulating everything all along. And all of that is set up in a much better way, I feel, by watching it in this order. This is the best way to tell this story. Having it all come out in this order heightens the emotional weight of each moment in a way that simply watching the 2 trilogies in either release order or chronological order can't. So, what does that mean for the rest of the movies? Well, Rogue One and Solo are both meant to be standalone movies. For all their connections to the larger saga, they aren't really meant to be blended in. And as for the sequel trilogy, it really doesn't have anything new to add to the story of Obi-Wan and Anakin, or even Luke and Leia. It's a new story in which Luke and Leia are peripheral characters, not really the main characters that I think everybody thought they were going to be. So after having watched the first 6 movies, you can really watch the others in any order you like. I would at least recommend watching Solo before you watch the sequel trilogy. I'll talk about why in just a little bit. This section of the video, I'm done talking about the spoiler order. I'm going to talk for a little bit about the virtue of maybe watching it in chronological order. Now it's an alternative. If you don't want, if you want to watch it in the spoiler order, then great. But I would also recommend the chronological order. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why. When you write a prequel, there's always a temptation to include a lot of Easter eggs, a lot of sly references to the original story, just to make the connections between them stronger. In this case, some of the references in episodes 1, 2, and 3 made about the original trilogy can seem a little forced, but they work just as well in chronological order, perhaps even a little bit better than they do in the release order. Maybe that's just my perspective from having watched these particular Star Wars movies so many times. The weight of certain scenes definitely hits differently, like watching Yoda as a Jedi Master first and a Swamp Dweller second, versus watching it in release order, where he's a Swamp Dweller first and a Jedi Master second. But that can be a good thing too, depending, of course, on your own point of view. Also, watching it in chronological order means that you'll be watching the prequel trilogy, and then Solo, and then Rogue One, and then the original trilogy. And there's definitely something to be said for how the ending of Rogue One leads directly into the original trilogy, Episode 4, A New Hope. It's different from how each of the original 6 movies have time skips between them, as I said before. It's like watching a 2-parter episode almost, or maybe a season finale and then a season premiere. The benefit of watching Solo before watching A New Hope is Han's character development. Let's be honest, he really doesn't get that much character development in Episode 4. We have it rammed into us over and over and over that he's only in it for the money, that he's not interested in being a rebel or in committing suicide by going up against the Death Star. Han showing up again at the last minute, it was awesome. It was really cool, but it goes against everything that we knew about him up to that point. Unless you watch Solo: A Star Wars Story first. He's a scoundrel in that movie, one who's learned to shoot first, to not trust people, even his friends. But he's also shown to be an idealist, someone who can be swayed by more than just self-interest, someone who's not afraid to join up with a cause. That's what's missing from his characterization in A New Hope. It's great, like I said, to see him show up at the last second to save the day, but there's not 1 second prior to that which gives us any foreshadowing for it. Solo fills in that gap, and then it even carries over into Episode 7, where he's again a smuggler who resorts to scamming people, but still has that heart of gold inside. So yeah, there's something to be said for watching the prequel trilogy, and then Solo, and then Rogue One, and then the original trilogy, and then the sequel trilogy. Chronological order can definitely work. But if you want something fancy, and if you want to heighten the suspense for each of the spoiler moments, then I recommend episode 1, episode 4, episode 2, episode 5, episode 3, then episode 6. And then you can watch the rest of the movies in whatever order you like. Okay, thanks for watching. That's my spoiler order video. Be sure to check out my podcast, Stephen Talks. On Tuesdays, I talk about current events, world events, that sort of thing. Thursdays are for entertainment-related topics. And it's available on all podcast platforms, or you can just find the posts on my website. Link in the description. You can also read my original fiction, available on all ebook platforms. Links on the homepage. Be sure to rate and review anything that you read and or listen to. And be sure to watch my other videos here. I have a couple of other Star Wars videos at least. Thank you for watching again, and I will talk to you more later.